Hi, I am Atuke Newell. I am a managing partner for UAS Properties. Our firm is currently the largest tenant. Our firm is the largest tenant placement firm and the fastest growing property management firm in the south side of Chicago. And some buddies and I built this company. We were Stanford undergrads together, started buying residential real estate, could not find a quality property management company, and eventually built what is now the fastest growing management company in the south side of Chicago. And today we're talking about the 10 keys for successful property management. And if you did not see the first 5 keys, I urge you to go back, look at the first 5 keys, because what we're going to talk about right now will not matter unless you do what we discussed in the first 5 keys. Property management key number 6. After you have rented a unit to a qualified tenant, then begins the process of mutual accountability. And that involves collecting rent from the tenant and delivering service, maintenance, and other service as the owner. And that's a twofold process. That is a twofold process. So we're going to cover key number 6 and key number 7 combined. Because on one hand, you've got to collect rent in order to deliver service. And on the other hand, you got to deliver service if you expect to collect rent. So we're going to start with rent collection. Rent collection is, in our business, just like any other bill, except you want your rent to become the most important bill that a tenant pays. You want your tenant to pay rent before they pay their car. You want them to pay rent before they pay their lights. You want them to pay rent before they go buy groceries, before they go buy alcohol, or before they go buy whatever they buy. You want them to be paying rent. So I'll tell you what our firm does in terms of rent collection. A couple days before the first of the month, every one of our tenants receives a statement in the mail that tells them, here's your rent balance, here's any late fees, here's any outstanding balance from the prior month. They get a prepayment envelope so that they can mail their check in. They can also bring their rent into our office. They can also call in a payment to our office. They can pay on the internet, and they can sign up for a recurring debit from their account. Because what do I want to do? I want to make it extremely easy for you to pay your rent and pay your rent on time every month. If they don't pay their rent on time on the 6th of the month, that's when the fun part begins. They get a 5-day notice. We've got a collection call center that calls that person 3 times a day, every day, at their house, on their cell phone, at their job, and their emergency contact to let them know we've got an emergency and we need to either collect their rent or establish a repayment plan. So when it comes to rent collection in our business, we make sure that rent becomes a top priority payment every month for our tenant base. And then there's the issue of service. Because I'm so aggressive in collecting rent from our tenants, I've got to be equally aggressive about responding to their maintenance concerns. They've got an obligation to pay rent. I've got an obligation to make sure our maintenance guys are responsive to their concerns. So you got to be ready. If you're going to manage your own property, you got to be ready to respond 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. Forget about a mutual fund. Real estate is not a passive investment. So you're going to have to be prepared to get up on a Saturday or Sunday. If that toilet leaks, you get out there and you get it fixed. If that knob is broken, you get that knob tightened. If that faucet is loose, you get that faucet tightened. And you do it promptly, you do it professionally, and you do it courteously, because that's your obligation as the landlord, and the tenant's obligation is to make sure that they pay your rent every month. So those are the first 2 keys of the second half of this discussion. Make sure you collect rent. You collect rent aggressively like anybody else that's out there collecting a bill, and make sure you deliver on the promise, you deliver service. And if you do those 2 things together, you can have a long-lasting relationship with that particular tenant. Next, we're going to talk about the issue of tenant relations. You know, many times you'll get a phone call that the tenant upstairs or the tenant downstairs are playing their music too loud, or the kids are running, the kids are jumping, or they move somebody else into a unit, etc. So you've got to develop a system for notifying a tenant that they may be in breach of some other obligation in their lease agreement that may not be related to rent. There's rent, and then there's everything else. You also got the obligation to make sure that all tenants have peaceful and quiet enjoyment in their rental units. So you've got to have a system for notifying people of lease violations. In our portfolio, if you break a rule, you get a lease violation. You break another rule, you get another lease violation. You break a 3rd rule, you get a lease violation, and now you're being sent to the attorney. We're putting you out. You can't live in one of our buildings. So make sure you've thought through how you will handle violations to the lease other than rent collection issues. That's very important to maintaining a community within a rental property, and that's going to be very important to the long-term return on your investment. Key number 5 is make sure that you are aware and familiar with the local ordinances that regulate rental property management. There are a system of rules related to everything from evictions to security deposits to lockouts to service and repair time frames that govern the rental industry in every municipality in the United States. And they're all different. The laws, the rules in Chicago are totally different than the rules in California, which are totally different than the rules in New York. So make sure in your rental market you know what the rules are, because the penalties can be severe. And I've seen owners that have lost their life savings and their investment because they broke a rule that they never even knew was a rule. So make sure you take the time, join your local real estate association, and read this magazine and read these articles, because they will keep you familiar with what the rules are. And finally, if you've done everything that I just outlined and the relationship it has not worked out, you've got to come to the roughest part of this business, and that's doing evictions. When it comes to evictions, I tell you, no matter how much pre-screening, no matter how consistent and fast you respond, there's just going to be some people where it won't work out. And if that becomes the case in your situation, you will have to go through the eviction process. And what I urge you to do is I urge you to do it sooner rather than later. I've seen a lot of owners. They'll wait 3 months. They'll wait 4 months. They'll wait 6 months. They'll wait 8 months before they take care of what should have been taken care of in the first month. And they've lost tons and tons of money in the process. So make sure you start that process right away. Secondly, make sure you serve the correct notice. In Cook County, there's absolutely no defense to I didn't pay my rent. I don't care if the building doesn't have a roof. If they're living in it and they're supposed to pay a certain rent, there's no defense to not paying it, even if it rains directly into their unit. So not paying rent, there's no defense. The only way you can lose that case is if you don't handle it correctly and you serve the wrong notice or you don't serve the notice properly. So in handling evictions, whether you choose to use an outside attorney, whether you choose to use a property management firm, or whether you choose to save some money and do it on your own, it's very important that you dot the I's, cross the T's, and serve the correct notice, make sure it's properly served, and in doing so, it's going to make the process go as quickly as it can, allow the tenant due process, and allow you an opportunity to regain possession of your rental property so that you can start over, and you'll start with property management tip number 1. I appreciate you listening to this discussion. I hope my thoughts have been helpful, and good luck in managing your rental property.